July 1943. On the rolling plains near the Soviet city of Kursk, engines growl to life. Thousands of tanks, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and swarms of aircraft are about to clash. This is the Battle of Kursk, history's largest tank battle and a turning point on the Eastern Front. In this documentary, we'll see how the battle came about, how it was fought, and why, after Kursk, Germany would never again regain the initiative in the East. 2 years earlier, in 1941, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union under Operation Barbarossa. German panzer spearheads tore deep into Soviet territory, reaching the outskirts of Leningrad, Moscow, and Rostov. But the quick victory Hitler expected never came. The Red Army, shattered but not destroyed, held on. Then came Stalingrad. In the winter of 1942–43, Soviet counteroffensives surrounded and wiped out the German Sixth Army. It was a disaster for Germany, tens of thousands lost, and the myth of invincibility broken. Yet the Eastern Front still stretched for thousands of kilometers. Both sides were exhausted, but neither was ready to stop. On the map, one feature now stood out: a huge bulge in the German line around the city of Kursk. By early 1943, Soviet offensives had created a great wedge of territory jutting into German positions. This was the Kursk salient, about 150 kilometers from north to south and 200 kilometers from west to east. To Hitler and his generals, it looked like a chance to strike a decisive blow. If they could attack the salient from the north and the south, capture Kursk and meet in the middle, they might encircle and destroy a massive Soviet force. The plan was given a code name: Operation Citadel. For Hitler, Kursk was more than a tactical opportunity. It was a chance to erase the shame of Stalingrad, to prove that new German tanks like the Panther and the Tiger could turn the tide. But while Germany prepared to attack, the Soviets were watching and waiting. Soviet intelligence quickly picked up signs of an impending offensive. Intercepted radio messages, reconnaissance photos, reports from partisans behind German lines, all pointed to the same place: Kursk. Stalin's instinct was to attack first, but his top commanders, including Marshal Zhukov, argued for a different plan. Instead of rushing forward, they would stay on the defensive. They would turn the Kursk salient into a fortress, absorb the German blow, then counterattack when the enemy was spent. Work began on a colossal defensive system. The Red Army built multiple belts of trenches and bunkers, stretching for hundreds of kilometers. They laid millions of mines. Anti-tank guns were dug in and camouflaged. Barbed wire, anti-tank ditches, and obstacles were placed to slow and channel German armor. Behind these lines, powerful Soviet tank armies waited in reserve, ready to move once the German attack stalled. By the summer of 1943, Kursk was one of the most heavily fortified areas on Earth. Operation Citadel finally opened on 5 July 1943. Before dawn, Soviet artillery hit German assembly areas in a preemptive barrage. Soon after, German guns answered with their own fire, and the offensive began. In the north, General Walter Model's Ninth Army attacked. German tanks and infantry immediately ran into deep minefields, dense barbed wire, and layered defenses. Progress was slow and costly. In the south, German units under Field Marshal von Manstein advanced from the Belgorod area toward the rail hub of Prokhorovka. Here, the Germans achieved deeper penetrations. Panzer IVs, assault guns, and heavy Tiger tanks pressed forward, while the new Panther tanks struggled with mechanical problems. Overhead, the air war raged. German fighters and dive bombers dueled with Soviet aircraft, including the rugged IL-2 Sturmovik. Bombs fell on tank columns and supply routes. The sky, as much as the ground, became part of the battle. But everywhere, German attackers found that the Red Army had learned from its early disasters. Soviet defenses were deeper, better organized, and far more resilient than in 1941 or 1942. As the days passed, the main threat came from the south, where German forces drove steadily closer to Prokhorovka. To stop them, the Soviets committed the 5th Guards Tank Army. On 12 July 1943, near Prokhorovka, the battle reached its dramatic climax. Just after dawn, Soviet tanks surged forward across open ground toward the German positions. Many T-34s and light tanks drove at high speed, trying to close the distance and fight the heavy Tigers at short range. The result was a chaotic, violent, armored clash. Dust and smoke reduced visibility. Tanks fired at silhouettes through the haze. Vehicles maneuvered around craters and wrecks, sometimes colliding or sliding into ditches. For decades, Soviet accounts described Prokhorovka as an enormous collision of thousands of tanks. Modern research suggests the numbers were smaller than first claimed, but still huge by any standard. The Soviets suffered heavy losses, but they achieved their main goal. The German advance was halted. The southern pincer, like the northern one, could go no further. By mid-July, it was clear that Operation Citadel would not achieve the breakthrough Hitler wanted. German forces had advanced, but only a few dozen kilometers in most sectors. They had not broken through the Soviet defensive belts. They had not encircled the Kursk salient. Instead, they were being worn down by a determined, well-prepared enemy. Then events elsewhere forced a decision. On 10 July 1943, Allied forces landed in Sicily, opening a new front in the Mediterranean. Hitler now faced growing pressure in both east and west. On 13th July, he ordered Operation Citadel to be called off. The last major German strategic offensive on the Eastern Front had failed. For the Red Army, the end of Citadel was only the beginning. Almost immediately, the Soviets launched their own offensives around Kursk. In the north, Operation Kutuzov struck the German positions around Orel. In the south, Operation Rumyavtsev targeted Belgorod and Kharkov. German divisions, already weakened by the failed attack, now faced fresh Soviet blows. They were gradually pushed back. By late summer 1943, Orel, Belgorod, and Kharkov had fallen to the Red Army. The front line moved steadily west. From this point on, the initiative in the east belonged firmly to the Soviet Union. Germany would fight on and fight hard, but almost always on the defensive. The Battle of Kursk was not just one clash at Prokhorovka. It was a vast campaign involving around 2 million soldiers, some 6,000 tanks and assault guns, thousands of artillery pieces, and many thousands of aircraft. Casualties on both sides ran into the hundreds of thousands. Germany lost a large number of its best tanks, and more importantly, many experienced crews and officers. The Red Army also paid a high price, but by 1943, the Soviet industrial base was outproducing Germany, and replacements could be found. Kursk proved several key points. First, German armored forces could be stopped, even in the summer, even when they attacked first. Second, carefully prepared defense in depth, backed by strong reserves, could blunt even the most powerful offensive. And third, industrial capacity and logistics were now as decisive as tactics and bravery. After Kursk, the question in the east was no longer whether the Red Army would push Germany back, but how far and how fast. Today, the fields around Kursk and Prokhorovka are peaceful. Memorials, museums, and rusting tank monuments mark the ground where so many fought and died. For historians, Kursk stands as the moment when the strategic balance on the Eastern Front tipped irreversibly against Germany. For those who were there, it was a brutal test of endurance, courage, and fear, one that would shape the final outcome of the Second World War.